This beggar girl discovers a motorcycle gang hidden and planning to ambush a millionaire. But what happens next is shocking. Please comment and rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The rumble of the black BMW's engine echoed through the deserted streets of Oak Creek when David Sanders spotted the small, hunched-over figure on the corner of Elm Street. It was 2:30 a.m., and the 30-year-old businessman was returning from a business meeting that had stretched late into the night. His green eyes, tired from the long day, almost missed the child sitting on the curb. But something about the image made him slam on the brakes. The girl couldn't have been more than 4 years old, though her frail appearance suggested even less. Matted brown hair fell over a dirt-streaked face, and her clothes, a torn t-shirt and stained shorts, looked like they hadn't been changed in weeks. David parked the car and got out, feeling the cold night air against his skin. "Hey there, little one," he said, crouching down to be at the child's level. "Are you okay?" The girl looked up, revealing enormous brown eyes that seemed to carry a weight incompatible with her tender age. There was fear there, but also a spark of hope when she saw that someone had finally stopped to talk to her. "My name is Clea," she murmured in a hoarse voice, as if she hadn't spoken in a long time. Can you help me?" David felt his heart clench. Throughout his privileged life as heir to Sanders Transport, one of the largest logistics companies in upstate New York, he had always carried a weight on his chest, the guilt of having been born with a silver spoon in his mouth while children like this one lived on the streets. His fortune, built on investments in stocks and bonds that yielded millions in dividends, contrasted brutally with the desperate reality before him. "Of course I can," he replied, taking off his coat and placing it over the girl's shoulders. "Where are your parents?" Clea lowered her head, and David realized he had touched a deep wound. The child only pointed to an abandoned warehouse across the street, her small hands trembling. There are strange noises," she whispered. "Not animals. I'm scared." David looked in the indicated direction and frowned. The warehouse, which once housed an old textile mill, was plunged into darkness, but he could hear muffled sounds coming from inside. Low growls, as if there was some kind of movement in the place. "Stay here," he said to Clea, taking his cell phone out of his pocket. "I'm just going to take a look." Curiosity and his protective instinct spoke louder than prudence. David had always been like that, unable to ignore the suffering of others, even when it put him at risk. It was a characteristic that his late mother always said would one day get him into trouble. He turned on the cell phone's flashlight and walked towards the warehouse. The side gate was ajar, creaking softly in the night breeze. David pushed it open slowly and peeked inside. What he saw made him freeze in place. 5 motorcycles were parked in the center of the warehouse, and around them, men dressed in leather were talking quietly about the next shipment and the Sanders truck. One of them, a tall guy with scars on his face, gestured violently as he talked about routes and times. "Tomorrow at 6 p.m., said the scarred man. "The truck always passes by Route 17 at that time. Martha confirmed that the load is worth over $2 million. David felt his blood run cold. Martha Cummings had been his financial manager for over 20 years, a woman the family trusted completely. But there, her name was being mentioned by thugs who were planning to rob his trucks. He tried to back away silently, but his foot bumped into an empty paint can. The noise echoed through the warehouse like thunder. "What was that?" growled the leader, turning towards the entrance. David ran back to where he had left Clea, his heart racing. The girl was waiting for him exactly where he had left her, but her eyes were wide with terror. "They saw you," she whispered. "They're coming." The sound of heavy boots echoed from the warehouse, followed by angry voices. David picked Clea up and ran to the car, his hands shaking as he tried to put the key in the ignition. "Hey, you there!" shouted a voice behind them. "Where do you think you're going?" The engine finally started, and David floored the accelerator. In the rear-view mirror, he saw the 5 men running towards the motorcycles. In a few seconds, the roar of the engines filled the silent night. "They're going to follow us," said Clea, her voice small but surprisingly calm for a child in a panic. David looked at her in the rear-view mirror and saw something that disturbed him even more. In the girl's eyes there was a sharp intelligence, as if she perfectly understood the gravity of the situation. It was not the typical reaction of a 4-year-old child. The headlights of the motorcycles appeared behind them, cutting through the darkness like blades. David turned sharply to the left, entering the maze of streets in Oak Creek's historic downtown. The colonial buildings on both sides created deep shadows that swallowed the car at every turn. "Who are these men?" he asked, more to himself than to Clea. "Snakes," replied the girl, surprising him again. "They talk about snakes. And about a man named Roger who wants to hurt the Sanders family." David almost lost control of the car. How did a street child know about his family business? And more importantly, how had she memorized such specific details? The sound of the motorcycles was getting closer. David knew that his BMW, however powerful, would not be able to outrun 5 motorcycles through the narrow streets of the city. He needed to find another way. It was then that Clea pointed to a dark alley between 2 old houses. "There," she said, "they won't fit with the motorcycles." David didn't hesitate. He turned the steering wheel and entered the alley, scratching the car's paint on the stone walls. For a few agonizing seconds, he thought he would get stuck, but the BMW managed to get through. On the other side, they emerged into a small square where a colonial fountain gushed water under the dim light of an old street lamp. David stopped the car and turned off the headlights, waiting in absolute silence. The sounds of the motorcycles passed by the main street and gradually moved away until they disappeared completely into the night. "How did you know about this passage?" asked David, turning to look at Clea. The girl shrugged as if it were obvious. "I remember everything I see," she said simply. At that moment, David realized that he had found much more than a lost child in the middle of the night. Clea possessed an extraordinary ability, and somehow she had become his only chance to find out who was betraying his company. But first, he needed to decide what to do with a 4-year-old girl who apparently had nowhere to go, and who was now the only witness to a conspiracy that threatened to destroy everything his family had worked for decades. The first rays of sunlight began to illuminate Oak Creek when David finally stopped the BMW in front of a small hotel on the outskirts of town. Clea had fallen asleep in the back seat, wrapped in his coat, but even sleeping she maintained a tense expression, as if she were always alert to danger. David watched the girl in the rear-view mirror, trying to process everything that had happened in the last few hours. His business mind, trained to analyze complex problems and find solutions, was in total panic. Martha Cummings, the woman he trusted to manage the company's finances, was involved with criminals, and now he had a child under his responsibility, a child who apparently possessed valuable information about his enemies. "Clea," he said softly, touching the girl's shoulder. "Let's go inside so you can take a shower and eat something." The child woke up instantly, her big eyes scanning the surroundings before fixing on David's face. It was a behavior he was beginning to recognize. Clea always analyzed every situation as if her life depended on it. "You're not going to leave me here?" she asked, her small voice filled with vulnerability. "No," replied David, surprised by the firmness of his own answer. "I'm not going to abandon you." He didn't know where this certainty came from, but something in the way Clea had saved him from the bikers, warning him about the danger, had created a bond he couldn't explain. Maybe it was his chronic inability to ignore those who needed help, or maybe it was something deeper. After checking into the hotel, David using a fake name as a precaution, they went up to a simple but clean room. While Clea was taking a shower, he called his office, hoping to find answers in the midst of the chaos of his mind. Sanders Transport, good morning, answered Carla, his secretary. Carla, it's David. I need to speak to Martha urgently. Mr. Sanders, Mrs. Cummings called early saying that she wouldn't be coming in today. Personal problems, according to her. David felt a tightening in his chest. Too much of a coincidence for the day after the meeting he had witnessed at the warehouse. Did she leave any specific message? Just that she would review the financial reports at home and send them by email. After hanging up, David walked to the window of the room. Down below, the morning movement of the small town followed its quiet rhythm. People going to work, children running to school, street vendors setting up their stalls in the square. A normalcy that contrasted brutally with the whirlwind his life had become. Clea came out of the bathroom, wearing the clean clothes that David had bought at the hotel reception. They were too big for her, but for the first time he could truly see the girl's face without the dirt of the street. She was a pretty child, with delicate features, but there was something in her eyes that disturbed him. A premature maturity, as if she had seen things that no child should see. "I'm hungry," she said, sitting on the bed with her legs crossed. While they were ordering breakfast in the hotel restaurant, David tried to get Clea to talk about her past, but the girl was evasive. She answered only with monosyllables or changed the subject, always watching who came in and out of the establishment. That's when she stopped eating and pointed discreetly to the entrance. "That woman," whispered Clea. "I've seen her before." David turned casually and saw Martha Cummings entering the restaurant, her hair disheveled and her eyes red, as if she had been crying. His financial manager seemed to be looking for someone, but when her eyes met David's, she froze. "David," said Martha, approaching with a forced smile, "what a surprise to find you here. And who is this little princess?" "A distant niece," lied David, carefully observing Martha's reactions. "Family problems?" Martha nodded, but her eyes kept studying Clea. The girl, in turn, kept her eyes fixed on the plate, but David noticed that she was tense as a spring about to jump. "David, I need to talk to you about some numbers that don't add up," said Martha, sitting down without being invited. "There are some discrepancies in the cargo reports that worry me." It was a smart move, David had to admit. Martha was trying to find out how much he knew, using the pretext of administrative problems. But there was something in the nervous way she spoke that confirmed his suspicions. "What kind of discrepancies?" he asked, keeping his tone casual. "Nothing too serious, but—" Martha paused when her cell phone vibrated. She looked at the screen and paled visibly. "Sorry, it's an emergency. I need to go." She got up hastily and left the restaurant, leaving David even more convinced that something was very wrong. It was then that Clea raised her eyes and surprised him again. "She was lying," said the girl with a disconcerting certainty. "And she's afraid of something." "How do you know that?" "When people lie, they do it with their eyes," explained Clea, touching the corner of her own eye. "And she kept looking at the door as if she wanted to escape." David was impressed with the child's observation skills. It was as if she had developed a sixth sense for detecting danger and dishonesty. Probably a survival skill developed during her months living on the streets. That afternoon, David decided to do a test. He called some company employees, pretending he needed to confirm information about routes and shipments. What he discovered made him nauseous. 3 of his oldest drivers reported suspicious mechanical problems on dates that perfectly matched cargo thefts in the region. The warehouse supervisor mentioned security system failures that no one could explain. And Martha's profit and loss reports didn't make sense when compared to the actual contracts. His company was being systematically sabotaged from the inside out. "I need to find out who else is involved," muttered David to himself, reviewing the papers scattered on the hotel bed. Clea, who was drawing on a notepad he had bought for her, raised her head. "I can help," she said. "How?" "I heard a lot of conversations when I lived on the street. People think children don't understand, so they talk about important things in front of us." She took another piece of paper and began to draw faces from memory. Simple but surprisingly accurate features. In a few minutes, she had sketched 5 different faces. These men always talked about trucks and money, she explained, pointing to the drawings. And this one, she touched one of the faces, always talked about a woman named Martha who gave them information. David felt the ground fall out from under his feet. Clea had not only witnessed the criminals' meetings, she had memorized faces and conversations with a photographic precision that even he couldn't have imagined. "Clea, this is very important," he said, kneeling in front of the girl. "Do you remember anything else they said?" The child closed her eyes, concentrating. "They talked about a man named Fernando who makes sure the police don't bother them, and about a woman named Silvana who can't walk but who is in charge of everything." Each new piece of information was like a puzzle piece falling into place. David was beginning to understand that he wasn't just dealing with a common gang of robbers, but with an organized network of corruption that extended to the local authorities. As darkness fell, he was about to call the state police when Clea interrupted him. "Don't call the police here," she said with that disconcerting seriousness. "The man Fernando they were talking about, he's a cop. I saw his uniform once." David hung up the phone immediately, realizing that he was more alone than he imagined. If the local police were compromised, he would need to find another way to expose the conspiracy. It was then that his cell phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Mr. Sanders," said a raspy voice he recognized immediately. It was the scarred man from the warehouse. "I believe we have something to talk about." "You saw things you shouldn't have seen." David looked at Clea, who was watching with total attention. His heart skipped a beat when he realized that the criminals had gotten his personal number. "I don't know what you're talking about," he tried to bluff. "Roger Vincent is my name, and I know exactly where you are. I even know you have a child with you. It would be a shame if something happened to her because of your excessive curiosity." The line went silent for a few seconds after Roger's threat. David could hear his own accelerated breathing as he processed the terrible reality. They knew where he was, they knew his personal number, and even worse, they knew about Clea. "What do you want?" he asked, keeping his voice steady despite the panic that was growing in his chest. "Simple. You will continue running your little company as if nothing had happened. You will keep your mouth shut about what you saw, and your shipments will continue passing through the places we choose. In exchange, you both keep breathing." David looked at Clea, who had stopped drawing and was watching him with those big, attentive eyes. Even being just a child, she seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. "What if I refuse? Then you will find out what it's like to lose everything you've built, your company, your reputation, your life, and the little girls too." The call was cut, leaving David with the phone trembling in his hands. He had built a fortune of millions, investing in stocks and expanding the family business, but now all of that had become a trap that could cost him and an innocent child their lives. "We need to get out of here," he said, starting to gather the papers scattered on the bed. "Where to?" asked Clea, putting her drawings away carefully. "I don't know yet, but we can't stay." They left the hotel through the back, David carrying only a backpack with the essentials. As they walked through the poorly lit streets of Oak Creek, he tried to formulate a plan. He couldn't trust the local police. He couldn't go back home or to the company. And now he had a child to protect. It was Clea who suggested seeking help in the neighborhood where she used to live. "There's a woman there who takes care of street kids," she said as they walked. "Her name is Iris. She's cool." "How do you know her?" "She always gave food and medicine to whoever needed it. Never asked questions, just helped." David hesitated. Involving more people in the danger didn't seem like a good idea, but he also couldn't take care of Clea alone while trying to unravel the conspiracy that threatened to destroy his life. The neighborhood where Clea led him was a poor area on the outskirts of the city, with simple houses and dirt roads. Even in the darkness, David could see that it was a place where hope constantly struggled against the harsh reality of life. Iris Moore's house was small but well cared for, with a garden in front where medicinal herbs grew. Yellow light leaked through the windows, and through them David could see a woman of about 28 years old, taking care of two small children. "Iris!" called Clea, running to the door. The woman opened immediately, and her face lit up when she saw the girl. "Clea! I was so worried. No one has seen you around here in weeks." Then her eyes turned to David, studying him cautiously. "And who are you?" "My name is David. Clea told me you help children. We need help." Iris invited them in, and David immediately noticed how the house, despite being simple, exuded care and affection. There were toys organized in corners, children's books stacked on improvised shelves, and the smell of homemade soup hung in the air. "Are you a nurse?" he asked, observing the carefully labeled medicine bottles in a cabinet. "I am. I work at the municipal hospital during the day and take care of the children in the neighborhood in my free time." Iris knelt in front of Clea, examining her with professional eyes. "Are you okay, honey? You look thinner." While Iris took care of Clea, giving her food and checking if she was hurt, David watched the interaction between them. There was genuine affection there, but also a deep sadness in the nurse's eyes whenever she looked at the girl. "May I ask why you need help?" said Iris, after Clea fell asleep on the sofa. David hesitated, but something in the woman's sincere expression made him decide to trust her. He told her about what he had witnessed in the warehouse, about Roger's threats, and about how Clea possessed information that could expose the entire corruption network. "My God," murmured Iris when he finished. "And the police? Compromised. According to Clea, there's a cop named Fernando involved in the scheme." Iris turned pale. "Fernando Adler, the chief of police? You know him?" "Unfortunately, yes. He has a dubious reputation here in the neighborhood. Many complaints that simply disappear. Evidence that gets lost." She paused, looking at the sleeping Clea. "You can't stay here long. If Roger is involved, this neighborhood isn't safe." It was then that she told her own story. Iris had lost a daughter 5 years ago in an accident that she suspected wasn't really accidental. The girl had witnessed something she shouldn't have, and a few days later she was run over by a driver who was never found. "That's why I take care of street kids," she explained, tears in her eyes. "It's my way of trying to protect others like my Sophia." The connection between them was instantaneous. Both carried guilt and pain from the past, and now they had a child to protect. David felt he had finally found someone he could trust completely. The next morning, Iris suggested that they seek help from Father Michael, a priest who ran a shelter for abandoned children in the neighboring town of Harmony Falls. "He doesn't like to ask questions, and the place is discreet," she said. But when they were preparing to leave, Clea made a discovery that changed everything. Playing in Iris's backyard, she found a cell phone hidden behind a fence, a device that clearly didn't belong to the nurse. "There are messages here," said the girl, handing the phone to David. The messages were between Martha and an unidentified number. David read with growing horror, "The shipment of medicines leaves tomorrow at 6 p.m. Route confirmed by Route 17. Perfect. Roger is ready. But there's a problem. Sanders saw you last night. I'll take care of it. I have a plan to discredit him. And the child who was with him? Iris is taking care of the matter." David felt the world collapse around him. Iris, the woman in whom he had placed all his trust, was working with the criminals. He looked at the nurse, who watched his reaction with an expression that now he realized was guilt, not concern. "Iris," he began, his voice filled with disappointment. "David, I can explain," she said, tears in her eyes. "It's not what you think." "Isn't it? Then why is there a cell phone with messages about us hidden in your backyard?" Iris took a deep breath, struggling with words that were clearly difficult to say. "Because I work for them, but not by choice." The revelation hit David like a punch in the stomach. "What does that mean?" "They have my son," whispered Iris, her voice breaking. Julian. He didn't die in the accident like I said. They kidnapped him and forced me to work for them. If I don't do what they say, they'll... She couldn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. David understood that Iris was as much a victim as an accomplice, trapped in a web of blackmail that forced her to betray innocent people to protect her own son. "Where is he?" asked David. "I don't know. They move him constantly. They only let me see him once a month to make sure he's okay." Clea, who had listened to the whole conversation in silence, approached Iris and touched her hand. "Is your son the same age as me?" she asked with her disconcerting wisdom. "He is. 4 years old," replied Iris, kneeling to be at the girl's height. "Then let's save him too," said Clea, with a determination that surprised the two adults. At that moment, David realized that the situation was even more complex than he had imagined. He wasn't just fighting to save his company and protect Clea. Now he also had to help rescue Iris's son and free the nurse from the blackmail that kept her prisoner. The sound of motorcycles approaching through the neighborhood interrupted his thoughts. Through the window, David saw 5 motorcycles stopping in front of neighboring houses, their occupants beginning a systematic house-by-house search. "They found us," murmured Iris, the terror etched on her face. David picked Clea up and looked desperately around the house, looking for a way out. But the motorcycles had already surrounded the area, and the sound of aggressive voices was getting closer and closer. "Is there any other way to get out of here?" he asked. Iris hesitated for a moment, then ran to a closet and removed a loose board on the floor, revealing a narrow passage that led to the basement of the neighboring house. "It was the escape route I built when I realized I was being watched," she explained quickly. "It leads to Mrs. Miller's house, who is traveling." They descended through the dark passage, David carrying Clea and following Iris through the makeshift tunnels. He could hear the bikers breaking into the house above them, shouting and breaking furniture in their search. When they finally emerged in the neighboring house, the sun was setting, painting the sky with orange tones that contrasted with the terror in their hearts. They had narrowly escaped, but David knew that it was only a matter of time until they were found again. And now he was sure of one thing. Roger and his gang weren't just common thieves. They were part of something much bigger and more dangerous, a network that used blackmail, kidnapping, and violence to control people and entire companies. The war had begun, and David was determined to win, no matter the cost. For 3 weeks, David, Iris, and Clea lived hidden in a small boarding house in the town of Harmony Falls, 30 miles from Oak Creek. The money that David had accumulated over the years in investments was quickly running out, but that was the least of his problems. Every day that passed, his company sank further due to constant thefts and internal sabotage. Iris had become a valuable ally, using her medical knowledge to take care of Clea and her contacts in the health system to obtain information about the criminal network. But the guilt for having betrayed David initially consumed her, and she spent whole nights awake, tormented by the image of her son Julian in captivity. "I need to find my son," she said one morning, watching Clea play in the small yard of the boarding house. "I can no longer live knowing that he is suffering because of me." It was then that Clea revealed yet another of her extraordinary memories. "I know where they keep the children," she said, looking up from her drawings. "I heard them talking about a big house with high walls near the river. They called it Silvana's house." David and Iris exchanged glances. Silvana was the name of the woman who, according to Clea, couldn't walk but was in charge of everything. If she really existed and kept kidnapped children on her property, this would explain how Roger managed to control so many people through blackmail. "Can you draw what that house looked like?" asked Iris, sitting next to Clea. The girl closed her eyes, concentrating. In a few minutes she had sketched a rural property with impressive details: high walls, iron gates, a main house, and several smaller buildings in the background. "I know that place," murmured Iris, studying the drawing. It's the old Vincent family farm on the road to Springfield. It's belonged to the family for decades. That night, while Clea slept, David and Iris planned a strategy. They couldn't simply invade the property, it would be suicide. But maybe they could gather enough evidence to report the criminal network to the state authorities. "There's something you need to know about me," said Iris suddenly, her voice filled with an old pain. "My real name isn't Iris Moore, it's Iris Adler." David felt his blood run cold. "Adler? Like Fernando Adler?" "He's my father," she confessed, tears running down her cheeks. "And I came to Oak Creek initially to investigate him. I knew he was involved in corruption, but I never imagined it would get to this point." The revelation hit David like lightning. For weeks he had trusted Iris, fallen for her dedication to children, for her courage in facing the criminals, and now he discovered that she was the daughter of the corrupt police chief who protected Roger. "Why didn't you tell me before?" he asked, struggling to control the anger and disappointment. "Because I knew you wouldn't trust me, and because—" She hesitated. "Because when I came here, my intention was really to investigate my father. But when they kidnapped Julian, everything changed. They found out who I was and used me as a double blackmail piece, against my father and against me." David walked to the window, watching the lights of the small town. His life had become a maze of betrayals and revelations, where every person he trusted hid painful secrets. "There's one more thing," continued Iris. "My grandfather was your father's partner in the company before you bought his stake completely. He lost a lot of money in that deal and never recovered financially." "Are you telling me that your family has reasons to take revenge on mine?" asked David, turning to face her. "No, I'm saying that when I came here I believed that, but knowing you, seeing how genuinely you care about Clea, how you risked everything to protect her, it changed everything. I fell in love with you, David, for real." Iris's words echoed in the silent room. David wanted to believe her, wanted to trust what his feelings told him about her character, but he had been betrayed so many times that he no longer knew who he could trust. The next morning, they were surprised by an unexpected visit. Martha Cummings appeared at the boarding house, alone and visibly desperate. "David, I need to talk to you," she said, tears in her eyes. "They have my son, too." The financial manager told a story that echoed Iris's. Roger and Silvana had discovered that her son Julian, the same boy that Iris believed to be her own, was sick with a rare condition that required expensive treatment. They offered to pay for the treatment in exchange for information about the company. "Wait," interrupted Iris. "You said Julian? How old is he?" 4 years old. "Why?" "Because they told me that my son's name is Julian, and he's also 4 years old." The realization hit everyone at the same time. There weren't two boys. Roger was using the same child to blackmail 2 different women, making each believe that he was her son. "But that means," began David, "that one of us is being deceived about motherhood," completed Iris. "Or both." It was Clea who brought the answer. Listening to the adults' conversation, she approached with one of her drawings. "Julian isn't any of your sons," she said with her disconcerting wisdom. "He's my brother." The drawing showed a thin woman with long hair holding 2 small children, a boy and a girl. "Our mother's name is Joan. She left us when she got sick because of drugs. Julian was taken first, then I ran away when I found out they were coming for me too." The truth finally revealed itself as a monstrous puzzle. Roger and Silvana weren't just stealing cargo and corrupting employees. They were kidnapping orphaned or abandoned children to use as blackmail against people who could be useful for their plans. "Silvana isn't paralyzed," revealed Martha. "I saw her walking when I went to deliver money to the farm. She feigns the disability so that no one suspects her of commanding the operation." That afternoon, David made a decision that would change everything. He called an old journalist friend in New York City, Robert Coast, who had specialized in investigating corruption in the interior. "Robert, I have a story that will interest you." but I need you to come in person, with recording equipment." When Robert arrived the next day, David, Iris, Martha, and especially Clea told the whole story. The girl, with her photographic memory, was able to provide accurate details about conversations, places, and people that no adult would have been able to remember. "This is material for a whole series of reports," said Robert, impressed. "But we need concrete evidence. Testimonials aren't enough." It was then that Clea revealed her last secret. During her weeks on the street, she had collected small objects that she considered important, including a flash drive that she found in the trash near the warehouse where she lived. "There are important things inside here," she said, handing the device to Robert. The flash drive contained detailed spreadsheets of the entire criminal operation, cargo routes, stolen values, percentages of bribes for corrupt police and employees, and especially a complete list of kidnapped children and the people who were being blackmailed through them. "My God," murmured Robert, examining the files. "This is enough to bring down the entire network." The final operation took place on a Saturday morning. Robert had coordinated with the FBI a simultaneous raid on the Vincent's farm and the gang's urban hideouts. David, Iris, and Clea watched from afar as more than 20 children were rescued, including Julian. Roger was arrested trying to escape by motorcycle, while Silvana, who really could walk perfectly, was found destroying documents in her house. Fernando Adler tried to use his position to escape, but the evidence against him was irrefutable. "It's over," said Iris, hugging David as they watched Julian run towards his real mother, Joan, who had been located in a rehabilitation clinic and was finally clean from drugs. But the price of victory was high. Sanders Transport had gone bankrupt during the months of sabotage. David lost all his fortune, his investments in stocks, his investments in cryptocurrencies. Everything he had built was gone. "I don't care," he said, watching Clea play with Julian and other rescued children in the temporary shelter. "I lost money, but I gained a family." 6 months later, David worked as a truck driver for a transport company in New York City. It was a humble but honest restart. Iris had gotten a job as a nurse at Columbia University Medical Center, and together they formalized Clea's adoption. The girl, now 5 years old, attended a school where her exceptional intelligence was recognized and stimulated. She still drew compulsively, but now her drawings showed happy families, houses with gardens and children playing, symbols of hope instead of memories of pain. "Do you regret it?" asked Iris one night as they watched Clea sleep peacefully in her room. "Regret what? Losing millions in assets? Seeing my company go bankrupt? Discovering that even my most trusted employees betrayed me? Stopping to help a lost child that morning?" David smiled, kissing Iris's forehead. "Never. That morning gave me you two. And you are worth more than any fortune I could have accumulated." At Clea's 6th birthday party, held in the small apartment they now called home, Joan and Julian were present, Martha, who had served a light sentence in exchange for her collaboration, and even Robert, who had become a close friend of the family. "Make a wish," said David, when Clea prepared to blow out the candles on the cake. The girl closed her eyes, concentrated for a moment, and then blew. When she opened her eyes, she was smiling. "What was your wish?" asked Iris. "That we continue to be a family forever," replied Clea, with that wisdom that had always characterized her. "And that other children like me find good people like you." That night, as they cleaned up the remains of the party, David reflected on how his life had changed completely. He had lost everything he considered important: wealth, status, financial security. But in return, he had gained something much more valuable: a family built on genuine love, courage, and the ability to do what is right, even when the price is high. Clea was right when she said that birds could fly wherever they wanted. Sometimes flying meant leaving behind everything you knew and starting over, and sometimes discovering that the place where you flew was exactly where you should have always been. If you liked this wonderful story, please comment giving a rating from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important. And if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.